This is Money, Motivation, and Mike, and I am your host, Michael Wainwright. In charge of all the controls and the show is Jason Wright. And hello to you, world. This is the show that will change your life. You can contact us at info@mx3.vip and find all of our content at mx3.vip or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content, which comes out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. Happy 2025 year, Jason.
Yes.
And as we talked about on last week's episode, and oh, by the way, we're just 1,400 subscribers short of already 110,000. It's like we went over 100,000 and it just ballooned. And I haven't even had a chance to set our goals yet for 2025 that we preached on the last one.
May need to be more lofty than you previously would have thought.
Do you know our channel views are up 97% over the last 28 days from the previous? Incredible.
Mm.
And you're doing a lot of watching on our show.
Yeah, it's all me. It's all me.
Hey, as we go in here to 2025, one little disclaimer here. You remember what I told you last week about this Ryan Seacrest?
Yeah.
And I really didn't even know who he was.
Okay.
Now I have been informed by watching New Year's Eve that is the New Year's Eve Dick Clark show hosted by Ryan Seacrest.
That's correct. Yes, I did know that.
I'm good now.
It's still the Dick Clark show.
I'm good now. Thank you. For those who continue to remember Mr. Clark. Okay, Jason, we've lost another pioneer. We've lost another big person that has been part of the United States government, the world leader, involved in obviously policy all over the world. The 39th President of the United States, James Earl Carter Jr., went home to be with the Lord December the 29th, 2024, which was also my birthday. I know you forgot, but that's okay.
Didn't forget.
The 39th President of the United States, better known as Jimmy Carter, and I remember him as the Peanut President, because he came from the peanut farms of Georgia. This is also the first presidential election that I remember is Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, 1976. So I'm 7+ years old. We actually had an election in second grade, and Jimmy Carter won that election. All the girls voted for Jimmy Carter because I think they thought he was better looking than Gerald Ford. Now, I had already been into the business arena of listening to family. And, of course, I was pulling the Gerald Ford string. But Big Gerald, the only president in the history to not be elected president of the United States, was defeated by Jimmy Carter. Now, Jimmy Carter also 100 years old. 100 years old. That is incredible in itself. October the 1st, 1924 to December the 29th, 2024. The American politician who served as the 39th President of the United States from 1977 to 1981. 77 was a great year. He was a member of the Democratic Party, previously served as the Georgia State Senate from 1963 to 1967. He was a huge supporter of JFK. Became the 76th governor of Georgia in 1971 to 1975. And he was the longest lived president in U.S. history and the first to live to be 100 years old. Now, what's intriguing about that is you think of all the mental and physical stress that's put on a president, and for a president to actually live to be 100 because of the health consequences that come along with holding the most important job in the world, your health suffers. And we've talked about on this show before of what a president looks like when they enter office and what they look like 4 years later when they leave. And the one thing they have in common is they all have gray hair.
Yeah, you definitely see the age from going in
and coming out. That's right. Now, maybe they have dyed their hair, but underneath, it's gray. Born in Plains, Georgia, Carter graduated from the Naval Academy. I did not know he was in the Navy. U.S. Naval Academy. 1946, and he joined the U.S. Navy submarine service. Was on a submarine. He returned home after his military service to revive the family's peanut growing business. Big supporter of racial segregation and supported the civil rights movement and became an activist with the Democratic Party. Now, when Carter served as the Georgia State Senate from 63 to 67, and then governor from 71 to 75, he was a major dark horse and not well known by anybody outside the state of Georgia. But somehow he come along and won the Democratic nomination and then narrowly defeated President Gerald Ford of the Republican Party in the 1976 presidential election. Carter, on his second day in office, Jason, pardoned all Vietnam War draft invaders. Pardon them. Yeah, and we have been having a lot of pardon conversations here during this term of going from one president to the other, from November to January. That was not a very popular thing to do. Another not so popular thing was the Panama Canal treaties. The Panama Canal. Most people don't even know that since 1903, the United States was in charge, control, ownership of the Panama Canal. And when Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter in 1980, Ronald Reagan said that the Panama Canal was one of the United States of America's biggest assets. And we just gave it away for virtually nothing.
Right. Over
a 20-year period. Because it phased in and phased in and phased in until Panama became the 100% owner of the canal in 1999. Now, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the Panama Canal, but that Panama Canal deal, for example, Vietnam, happened and gone. Now, I know there's a lot of pain and suffering that continues on with the lingering effects of going to a war and et cetera, et cetera. But this Panama Canal deal, which I'm going to spend just a moment on, continues on and on and on and on and on for centuries. It's going to continue on. And why? Because of all the money that the federal government of the United States of America, because it does still have to be passed, even though Carter gave it away and he was not in the best cahoots with Congress, they still had to vote and give it away, and they did. But I want to give you some prices here of what it costs for that 8 to 10 hour journey through the Panama Canal. That's what it takes. Yeah. About 8 to 10 hours. And what'd you say, 35 to 40 boats a day?
That was the average, yes.
So we call it vessels.
Right.
Vessels.
There you go.
There you go. All right. If your vessel is 65 foot or less, it's just a little family cruise, right?
Yeah.
Still $3,060 to cross. If it's 100 foot or more, it's $6,300 plus to cross through the canal. Now, they have all kinds of fees. Transit tolls, TIV inspection fees, security charge. They even have a buffer because they expect charges to be more than what they're quoting you.
Oh, yeah. Resort fees and such.
Oh, Panama Mafia down there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And you must have paid these fees before. And they prefer United States cash. How about that? You know, they were taking no dinero down there or pesos or anything else, right?
Well, we were in control, so they probably just stuck with it.
Yeah. According to the latest tolls proposed by the Panama Canal Authority in April of 2022, container ships now pay somewhere between $60,000 and $300,000, depending on their size, and then additional fees based on the number of containers the ships are carrying, because that is the main purpose of the canal, is to transport goods from the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans back and forth, whatever way you're going. $300,000, Jason.
Yeah.
Now, they did expand the canal. Before they expand the canal, now Panama expanded it. I'm sure that the United States probably paid for most of it, and I know China's got something to do with it now, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Well, I know that they have some. They're building some bridges.
Yeah.
Down there, and they have a couple of ports.
I don't know how China can get involved in that. I guess because everything comes from China. Is that what it is?
I guess so.
Before the expansion, the record toll paid by one ship was $461,000. After the expansion, the record jumped to $1.1 million. The canal provides 12% of the gross domestic product of the country of Panama. The country of Panama.
Gotcha.
Oh my goodness. In 2023, one liquid natural gas company paid $2.4 million to skip to the front of the line, bringing their total charges close to $3 million to get through that canal in a quicker fashion. So it's a bidding war out there. I guess you better have some friends in the waters.
Yeah.
But you can skip the line if you're willing to pay.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. So, okay, you do this weekend, Jason. You go to Walmart and you tell them that you're willing to pay an additional 50% of your fee if you can skip to the front of the line.
Mm-hmm.
How you think that's going? First of all, you're going to get knocked in the head by some other customer on your way to the front.
Just pay the customer directly instead.
All right. On these cruise ships, which is a big deal, the first 10,000 tons cost $5.25 a ton, a whopping $52,500, President Carter. That's on the 10,000. It kind of scales down a little bit from there, but these cruise ships, I believe you said, were weighing anywhere from 100,000 tons to 225,000 tons. I mean, they're little floating cities.
Yeah.
At $5.25 a ton.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a calculator for that deal, Mr. Carter. Now, rest in peace. What would that Panama Canal have done for our debt in the United States of America? Well, probably nothing. We probably would have spent it on something else.
It'd still be a significant deficit, but.
Okay, bad point, Mike. Bad point. Okay, you are correct. You are correct. Carter was that's the deal on the Panama Canal. And now we're going to get back to honoring the 39th president, Mr. James Earl Carter Jr. He's the only president to serve a full term without appointing a justice to the Supreme Court. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a big deal right here. You know, his presidency, you know how the last thing you hear is kind of the one thing you remember. His presidency was marked by the Iran hostage crisis of, I think, about 440 days, 400 plus days, I remember. Because every night on the news, they would say, this is day 227, 350, whatever it was.
Yeah. On
getting these hostages out of Iran. All right. Now, because of the negativity that went along in Jimmy Carter's administration, in essence, he was not given credit for the release of those hostages. Now, when you go back to this, would have been January the 20th, 1981, as Reagan is being sworn in as the 40th president.
Yeah.
Okay. January 20th, we'll just say 1981, right there. I think it was the 20th, but whatever day it was.
I think it was too.
Well, I know it was because I'm sitting here looking at it. He went out of office January the 20th, 1981. Okay. I guess it always happens on the 20th. Frankly, I didn't know that. But nevertheless, January the 20th, 1981, the Carter administration had worked very hard on getting these hostages back and taken a lot of grief. I remember this throughout 1979, 1980, like it was yesterday, because it was a big topic every night. at the 5, 6, and 10 news updates, and how the hostages were being treated, and they did negotiate better conditions as they went, but you're still a hostage. So they had negotiated the release, and it really got going after Reagan was elected in November of 80. These hostages sat on an airplane on the runway, and that plane did not take off until Ronald Reagan became president. That plane took off in the air as he is being sworn in. So he gets the credit.
Yeah.
Because it's just like some of this Trump stuff right now. He's going to go over here and bang, 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 and everybody gets scared, and so they start giving in and doing all these other things. That's why you have to have a leader as the President of the United States.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff right there.
Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, you ever heard the name Walter Mondale?
I have.
That's Carter's vice president.
Oh, okay.
Who later made an unsuccessful run to becoming President of the United States. Walter Mondale ran in 84 against Reagan in his second term and had the first female vice president candidate, Geraldine Ferraro. It's all here on Money and Motivation, Mike. You just find out so much information. We are here to educate and inform.
And sometimes entertain.
And most definitely entertain. And most time we don't know what we're doing, but that's okay. Jimmy Carter, obviously a Democrat and a major, major conservative Democrat. Liberal Democrat. He was so liberal that a lot of the Democratic Party didn't care for his policies. That's how liberal he was. If you can think about how liberal it is today, go a little bit farther with President Carter.
Wow.
Now, his sidekick in life was his wife, Rosalind Smith Carter. They got married in 1946, and they were married till her death. She died in 23, a year before Carter did. If you go back and watch that funeral, he's in a kind of a laying down wheelchair. Had no comments, couldn't.
Yeah.
And this is how long Jimmy Carter has been alive. He has 4 kids. His oldest kid is 77 years old. How about that?
Yeah.
His daughter, he's got 3 boys. They were already gone. His daughter comes along. She's like 15, 20 years. All the boys are in their 70s. And she's like mid-50s. She's a little bit older than me. And so she got to be in the White House. Now, there was a school function, and I don't think it was the prom, because I don't think she graduated when she was in high school. She was not in high school whenever they were in the Oval Office. But she had a party, spring formal. I don't know what it was. Might have been homecoming. I don't know. They had 100% participation for this event because the event was held at the White House. Every student in the school showed up.
I would too.
Yes. Jimmy's parents, obviously, James Earl Carter Sr. and Bessie Gordy. Very interesting stuff. The Naval Academy, I did not know about that. So good stuff. He got up to the rank of lieutenant, served in World War II, American Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, China Service Medal, National Defense Service Medal. This is interesting right here. I don't know why I say that, because everything on our show is interesting, Jason. Carter attended Plains High School, obviously Plains, Georgia, from 1937 to 1941, graduating from the 11th grade because the school did not have a 12th grade. How about that?
Wow.
Which is interesting because he was a big provider, supporter of the Head Start program that LBJ started in the 60s. And Carter took it to a different level, the Head Start. So he didn't even get to go to 12th grade. And he's over here making school start even younger with the Head Start program. Now, this is funny. Now, Jimmy was a very smart person, President Carter. He was a diligent child, student. fondness for reading. It was a popular advocate. He was passed over for valedictorian after he and his friends skipped school to venture downtown in a hot rod. Carter's truancy was then mentioned in a local paper, and he did not get to be, this is how the story goes, he was not valedictorian because he skipped school. That goes on every day. The parents show up and get these kids. All they got to do is make a phone call on their cell phone, and mom and dad run down there and get them. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. What do you want to do? Let's go to Starbucks. What do you want to do? Are you sick? No. Just want to come home. I'm done. 4th grade. I'm out. Bye-bye. And this dude loses. The president, 39th president of the United States, does not get valedictorian because he skipped school and got in a hot rod and went downtown. It made the newspaper.
Must have been slow news days back then.
Yeah. If they did that for the kids and the parents that were involved in such an act, we would have 10,000-page newspaper every day.
Oh, yeah.
Good grief. Of course, President Carter was a highly active member of Future Farmers of America, better known as the FFA. He graduated 60th out of 820 midshipmen in the class of 1947. He has a bachelor's degree in science. Throughout his naval career, and for a long time, Jason, when you were running for president of the United States, they wanted to know about your service. Did you serve in the war? Did you serve in the armed forces, period? That was a big deal. You know, you hardly even hear it now. Now, we really haven't had anything going on since Afghanistan and stuff like that. But nevertheless, they want to know if you served. But they also want to know if you went to and got a college degree. And there was a lot of service going on because people were not getting to go to get education, etc. Mm-hmm. I mean, look here at President Carter, made it to the 11th grade, and that was as far as he could go. So the Navy took Carter to Virginia, Hawaii, Connecticut, New York, California, the Atlantic and Pacific fleets on the submarines. And he became officer training and the submarine duties. And then he served on the USS Pomfret. That was the submarine he was on. Very highly active. And then we come to 1963, when Carter becomes state senator of the great peach state of Georgia. From 1963 to 67, he was a state senator. Not in Congress. He was a state senator on the state level. He had no experience in D.C. when he ran for president in 1976. But like I told you before, during his Senate, he was a big civil rights movement, as well as under his way when Carter took office. And then, of course, he and his family were big JFK supporters, as I had mentioned. Now, in 66, Carter ran for governor against liberal former governor Ellis Arnall and conservative Lester Maddox, all in the Democratic primary. He got 3rd place out of those 3. He lost the primary, but drew enough votes as the 3rd place candidate to force a runoff between the other 2 candidates. So he had made his mark, but he was an unsuccessful run to become governor. So in 1970, when he ran for governor again, this time against Governor Carl Sanders, Carter's main opponent in the Democratic primary, he won that, and then he became the 76th governor of Georgia, January the 12th, 1971. And in his inaugural speech, he declared that the time for racial discrimination is over, shocking the crowds and causing many who had supported him during the race to feel betrayed. As you got to remember, we're still highly active in segregation, desegregation, whatever you want to call it. I mean, blacks and whites still going down the middle here. And obviously his supporters did not know what he had in mind. But civil rights were a high priority for Carter, who added black state employees First person to add black state employees to the Capitol in Atlanta, Georgia. He put up the first prominent black Georgian in the Capitol building, Martin Luther King Jr. Also put up Lucy Craft Laney and Henry McClure Turner. This, of course, angered the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, who back then were vocal. They weren't behind the scenes. They weren't, obviously they were under the capes, but they supported political folks that were running for office publicly. And of course, the KKK was not happy with Jimmy Carter, and I'm sure they probably didn't vote for him as he come along in 1976 and ran for president. And on December the 12th, 1974, Carter announced his presidential campaign. His strategy proved to be successful. In mid-March 1976, Carter was not only far ahead of active contenders for the presidential nomination, but he led incumbent Republican President Gerald Ford by a few percentage points. Now, Watergate, we've got to do a Watergate. We got to do a Panama Canal too. What we got right now? About 3 years worth of episodes.
Oh, yeah.
And not even including the things that come up, just like here we are, the death of President Carter. The Watergate scandal was fresh on everybody voters' minds. And of course, Gerald Ford was tied to that because he was the vice president of Richard Nixon, and on and on and on. Okay, some of these things on the civil rights, the margins narrowed as they got closer to the election, which was in November of 1976. People still really did not know Carter that well, but it's kind of like what we've been doing for the last couple elections. We don't like who's in there, so we vote for the other guy or gal because the other person we don't care for. Now, as this went on, Carter published a memoir, Why Not the Best, considering himself the best, to help introduce himself to the American public. As I already mentioned, Walter Mondale, he was chosen July of 1976. Walter Mondale was a U.S. Senator, and he became his running mate, and then, of course, the Vice President of the United States. Carter and Ford faced off in 3 televised debates. It was the first United States presidential debates since 1960, which would have been JFK and Richard Nixon. Nixon being the vice president of Eisenhower. How about that? Now, Jimmy Carter, huge into his religion. Had Sunday school, still taught Sunday school into his 90s. People would line up hours in advance at the church to be able to get into the auditorium to listen to him teach Sunday school. Okay, so I put all that out there for this. November 1976 issue of Playboy.
Okay.
Yeah, which hit the newsstands a couple of weeks before the election. Robert Scheer interviewed Carter. While discussing his religions, his view of pride, Carter said, "I've looked on a lot of women with lust. I've committed adultery in my heart many times." This response and his admission to another interview that he did not mind if people uttered the word that starts with the F led to a media feeding frenzy, which really closed the gap between him and Ford as the election approached. And crisis broke out, and people were going crazy over the very laid back, good old boy peanut cropper from Georgia had now done an interview with Playboy magazine. And I'm going to tell you, in 1976, that wasn't the thing to do. I mean, today, no big deal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it. So Carter once with a sizable lead over Ford in the national polling. And then here we go with this. And it's neck and neck coming down. One Gallup poll actually had Ford ahead. Thrusts, expecting Ford to carry the Electoral College, which we've talked about many times. But in the end, Carter ultimately won, receiving 297 electoral votes and 50.1% of the popular vote, to Ford's 240 electoral votes and 48% of the popular vote. So that was 1.9% to all the other candidates. Carter's victory was attributed in part to his overwhelming support among black voters in states decided by close margins. Get this. Now you think about how these states vote now. All these states Carter carried: Louisiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Mississippi, Wisconsin, Ohio. How about that? In Ohio and Wisconsin, there was margin between Carter and Ford. It was under 2 points. The black vote was critical for Carter. If he had not won both of those states, he would not have won the election. And they were both less than 2 points. And we talk about how close these elections are. The hanging Chad from 20-something years ago down in Broward County to what we saw with President Biden getting elected 4 years ago and the high jump and then coming back down. This stuff's been going on forever. Okay. Most people don't remember who Gerald Ford's vice president was. Nelson Rockefeller. Because remember, he had to be appointed because when Nixon resigned, even though he's not a crook. I'm not a crook. Famous words. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller oversaw the certification of the election results on January the 6th, 1977. I say that because of what we went through 4 years ago with Mike Pence. I guess January the 6th is when we put the votes into play, and January the 20th is when the president goes into office. It appears to me. January 6th, 1977, Vice President of the United States. And the Rockefellers had their name in the presidential, vice presidential positions. Now, as we go into the presidency in 1977 as the 39th president on January the 20th, as I've already said about the Vietnam and the draft invaders, that was Proclamation 4483. Now, the big deal with Carter's presidency was it was troubled by economic history. Unemployment up to 9%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, for all fairness, measured a 6.6% unemployment rate during the Carter administration. His last 2 years were marked with double-digit inflation, very high interest rates, oil shortages, and slow economic growth. How would you like to be trying to sell houses at 14, 16% interest rates?
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. The sudden doubling of crude oil prices by OPEC, still involved. The world's leading oil exploration crude oil company at that time, OPEC, forced inflation to double-digit levels, averaging 11.3% in 79 and 13.5% by 1980. The sudden shortage of gasoline, and I can remember this too, the 1979 summer vacation session, lines seemed like for miles, Jason, lined up at the gas station. You probably have heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
Before your time.
Yes.
And all of this gas shortage originating in the shutdown of Amerada Hess refining facilities. Amerada Hess, huge in West Texas. Some of our family members made a living off serving those oil workers in the Amerada Hess oil fields. This led to federal government suing the company of Amerada Hess for shutting down. This is free enterprise in this world. They decide to shut down because of the prices and the shortage, and they get sued for it. And wouldn't you like to see them try to and look at all these fines they put on the out here the oil well that blew up out in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, Deepwater Horizon.
Deepwater Horizon. Yep, BP. Okay. All that being said, Carter did not have a good relationship with Congress, not at any time. Carter typically refused to conform to Washington's rules, the old good old boy system. He avoided phone calls from members of Congress and verbally insulted them. He was unwilling to return political favors. He negatively led frustration in passing legislation. Would not return their phone calls. The guys and gals that need to raise their hand to vote for your policy. Carter stated in February 23, 1977. And remember, he's only been president for a month. Carter stated that it was inevitable that he would come into conflict with Congress and that he had found no reason to do otherwise. Within 100 days of office, Carter was receiving opposition from members of his own party. Now, this rift ensued between the White House and Congress afterward. Carter noted that the Democratic Party's liberal wing opposed his policies and most admirably attributed to Ted Kennedy. Okay, him and Kennedy were always into it. And then in 1980, that's when Ted Kennedy ran for president of the United States against Carter in the Democratic primary. All this tension for these 4 years is what led Ted Kennedy to running. This is now Carter. Remember, he called this the fat pork barrel spending is what he called it. The trimming the fat, draining the swamp, pork barrel spending. He found himself again at odds with congressional Democrats as House Speaker Tip O'Neill found a lot of his policies inappropriate. And Tip O'Neill carried a lot of weight, Jason. You ought to go research that dude. Then we come to the Chrysler bailout. Here's another episode we need to discuss. In the late 1970s, the Chrysler Corporation, one of the big three, still is, automobile manufacturers in the U.S., faced near certain bankruptcy as it projected a loss of $1 billion. In December of 1979, Congress passed H.R. 5860, the Chrysler Corporation Loan Guarantee Act of 1975, to bail out Chrysler at $3.5 billion, equivalent to almost $11 billion today.
Wow.
Yep. Healthcare, he never did anything done with healthcare. That was a struggle in itself. As a matter of fact, Ted Kennedy had his own proposal. So, you know how, let's just take Obamacare and how presidents go out and attack healthcare. This was one of the big rifts that in 1977, Ted Kennedy jumps out with his own health care, of which the Democrats supported more than the Carter. And then so Carter never got anything done. Now, one note. In 1980, Carter signed into law the Mental Health Systems Act. So we were talking about mental health in 1980. And we basically have avoided it for 40 years to the mental health of the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as I already said, he was big on education, and Carter expanded the Head Start program with the addition of 43,000 children and families, while the percentage of non-defense dollars spent on education was doubled. Now, did you go to Head Start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I did as well. So see, when I went there in the mid 70s, it was a very new program. Like I say, LBJ introduced it. Carter was complimentary to President Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 89th U.S. Congress, for having initiated Head Start. In a speech on November 1st, 1980, Carter stated his administration had extended Head Start to migrant children and, get this, and was working hard right now with Senator Benson, that's Lloyd Benson from Texas, with Quita de la Garza, Texas, to make as much as $45 million available in federal money in the border districts to help with the increase in school construction for a number of Mexican school children who reside here legally. We still do the same stuff now that we did back then.
How much has changed?
I just thought it was interesting that Democratic President Carter used the word legally. I'm going to put money down there, We're going to support it. Obviously, the state of Texas was behind it. Lloyd Bentsen, who ended up running in 1988 with Michael Dukakis against. That was against Bush number one.
Okay.
And Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle was running for vice president. Lloyd Bentsen running for vice president. Great debate. You ought to go back and watch that debate. You want to see somebody get dominated? Okay. As we have touched on several things that we continue to touch on to this day. Here we go. The final one. LGBTQ rights. During Carter's administration, he lifted its ban on gay and lesbian personnel. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter's administration became the first American presidential administration to invite gay, male, and lesbian rights activists to the White House to discuss federal policy with regard to ending employment discrimination in federal employment on the basis of sexual orientation and related issues. Everything I just talked about right there, we're still doing today. And matter of fact, we're talking about President-elect Trump has talked about the Panama Canal. Yep. And we talked about health, and we talked about education and gay rights, and on and on and on. And here we are, just as we start 2025 and another president coming into office here in the next 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
And we're still doing what we've been doing, and we're still getting what we've always gotten. And that's a fact. Incredible that somebody 40 years from now, Jason, will be doing this show. Because I expect this show to go on just like the Tonight Show. You know, Johnny Carson,
yep.
Jay Leno, and actually there was a guy for a couple of years before Carson. I can't think of his name right now. Carson was not the original. Then Leno, because Letterman got passed over. Yeah. And we got, what was it? One of those Jimmy boys. He does it now. Kimmel?
Kimmel. Yeah.
Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel is the Johnny Carson. That's what I call him.
Yes.
Who's the Johnny Carson on ABC, NBC, whatever it is, CBS? Money, Motivation, and Mike continues to bring you topics according to our records and our numbers, and the facts do not lie. That seem to be uplifting, interesting, and, as Jason said, entertaining to you. And today, we discussed the losing of another great person in the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. Find us at mx3.vip. Contact us at info@mx3.vip, or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content, which Jason puts out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. Now, an extension of our previous episode, as we get ready to wrap up here, you got to get those goals on paper. Got to get them on paper. We went over those statistics. It's 2025. It's time to do something different than we did in 2024. And if you had a great 2024, let's make it a better 2025. For everyone who's been a part of Money, Motivation, and Mike today, continue to live your life the right way.